Today's episode is brought to you by Torero. Stop worrying if your peers have the environment to run your automation. Torero is a free tool that enables you to launch Python, playbooks, and plans against production while handling dependencies. Find out more at torero.dev. Torero.dev.
Packet pushers.
Hello and welcome to the Network Automation Nerds podcast, where we explore the latest in network automation from a practitioner's perspective. I'm your host, Eric Cho, a network engineer who loves everything about network automation. Have you ever needed a reliable way to simulate network system interaction without the hassle of setting up a complex hardware or virtual devices? I know you can't see it, but I'm raising my virtual hand here. Today, we're spotlighting a remarkable project called FakeNOS. We have the creator and the maintainer of this project, Denis and Enric, with us today. Whether you're a network engineer looking to experiment in a controlled environment, or you're a DevOps engineer wanting to run a network testbed for your processes, you can use FakeNOS for your projects. We'll also hear about both of their journey, insights, tips, and tricks for getting the most out of FakeNOS. So I'm really excited to hear their story and how the project came about, all the backstories. And welcome to the show, Denis and Enric. Hello.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah. Hi, Denis.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so maybe we should just start with the origin story. If you could just tell us about yourself, how did you get into networking? Because that's always kind of interesting. So why don't we start with you, Denis, on, how did you get into network engineering?
Yeah, sure. I got in network engineering straight from the university.
Mhm.
When I graduated from it in 2011 as a Bachelor of Telecommunication Systems. Pretty much since then, I was working in that space. And I managed to get CCIE service provider over time and migrate to Australia from my country of origin, which is Russia. And as I was growing as a network engineer, I started feeling the need to do more of the automation type of stuff.
Right.
Because I was working mainly in service provider environments, and they usually have not the very complex network setups, but their setups are numerous. They have many devices doing pretty much same things. And automation is a great skill to develop when you're working with service provider networks. And I started learning Python in about, I think, 2015. Yeah, back in 2015, I started learning it to help me with doing simple scripting, solve different tasks and problems I encountered at my work. And out of that, I started feeling the necessity to create projects probably for various problems that I wasn't able to find a solution for,
Right.
like available solutions. And that's pretty much it, how I started.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I think solving your own problem, that's always nice.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, what about you, Enric? I mean, before we hit record, I heard, interesting story on how you started, how you just came about to network engineering, and tell us all about it.
Well, I'm still studying. I'm just finishing my master's degrees. I studied telecommunications engineering as well as Denis. In my case, I did it in Barcelona. And later on, I decided to move forward with my career as well. So I decided to study cloud and network infrastructures, the master's. It's a program from the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
I studied a double degree master in KTH in Sweden and Aalto University in Finland. Basically, right now, I'm just finishing my thesis, comparing several parameters about how to do network automation, which currently is not really researched there. So, well, I'm trying to be one of the first in that sense. I don't have as much background, unfortunately, yet as Denis. But yeah, I started with network engineering already 3-4 years ago. I started doing network maps. I was quite new at that time. So I had a problem that I wanted to basically, I'm really lazy myself. So I decided to, why not map it automatically? So basically I started doing with Python, some scripts and so on. So I move forward, start doing websites and so on. So this is how I started with network automation in that sense.
What better way to patch up resume by creating a awesome project that open source and everybody's using and people are seeing praises about it. So I'm really impressed. I mean, it sounded like you've done a lot, right? In just 4 years. If you only started in 4 years, I feel ashamed Like I haven't done enough.
No. I mean, it's just like I really like it. I like to always move forward and try to what can I improve here? There's a problem there. I like to dig out and try to make it better. So that's always myself.
All right, absolutely. I think that's a great attitude, and I think most of the guests that I interview who have done code project kind of shared that attitude, right? Like if there's a problem that doesn't have a solution, instead of complain about it, let's just go, be the change you want to be. And if there's like, always constantly looking for improvement that they could do to up their game. Like I said, I feel ashamed. I need to up my game here to match up for that trajectory. If that's 4 years, then 20 years on my end, then I'm falling behind. But no, I love to hear kind of how the project came about, right? And I believe, Dennis, you were the creator for this project originally before Enric, kind of discover it and take on the maintainer role.
Yeah, that's right. This is the case here. Yeah, as I was doing some lightweight scripting to automate stuff, and I kind of liked it in a way that, yeah, as Enric said, I'm also quite lazy person. I don't really enjoy doing the same thing twice. So that's why I felt that I need to scale up and come up with a solution that will help me to solve the same problems in the best possible way. And that's why I started working on another open source project of mine, which is SaltStack Nornir Proxy Minion. And to test that open source project, I needed some, network devices, basically. And the choice was either to emulate them using VMs or containers,
Yep.
or do the patching of Python objects, which is not always straightforward. And I started looking for another way of doing that, more lightweight approach. And surprisingly, I wasn't able to find much in the Python space on the network simulation aspects of it. And that's why I decided to create the FakeNOS to help me with basically testing this other open source project of mine. That's the origin story behind it.
That's interesting. So you actually had a open source project that is a tie-in with SaltStack, right? Did I hear correctly? It was like a proxy runner, or?
It's a proxy minion. Yeah, it's basically you have a master and you have your minion talking to devices, but the secret sauce of this minion that it's based on Nornir. And Nornir, as you might know, it's an open source library that can talk with multiple devices at the same time.
Right.
And that's kind of where the beauty of this approach is, because you can combine SaltStack with Nornir, and that gives you probably the most possible scalability out there in the open source. But again, to test this, you need either a lot of resources to spun up virtual instances of network devices or simulate them somehow. And yeah, I used mainly FakeNOS to do the simulation part of the testing for this project.
So tell us a little bit of that problem you're trying to solve, right? So you said, yeah, maybe somebody on the other side of the, mic here listening to the show was saying, hey, I could just easily spin up CML lab, or I could have container lab, spin it up, and I could test my script. But what is that problem that you're trying to solve? You said latency is one, or like scalability is one. You can't launch, I don't know, hundreds, right? So what exactly did you have in mind that was the biggest problem that prompted you to actually start another project to do this?
Yeah. So it's fairly easy to spin up virtual instances, like 1 or 2 routers, or maybe even 10 or 20 routers, and do testing on them. But it's completely different story if you want to have like 100, even just 100 routers to do the testing. And that's mainly the performance testing if you want to do, or you want to test the connection establishment, like the actual SSH session initiation and retrying the connections and authenticating the endpoints via the SSH. All these things can't be done at scale with just virtual devices. That's one aspect of it. The other side of things is virtual devices, they give you pretty much the same capabilities as physical devices have, but sometimes you don't use like 99% of these features. If your goal is just to test that you can establish SSH connection, grab some output from many devices, and you can verify that your tool, your script doing it properly, it's doing it reliably, and it's doing it more or less fast, relatively fast, right? If this is the purpose, then yeah, simulating the network is probably, in my opinion, the best way to solve this problem. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think you're trying to test your code, right? You're trying to test your project. You're not trying to test the scalability of your test bed. It's like I would like fire up 10 devices, if that, and then my laptop is about to take off. It's like the fan started spinning and like I can't even touch the keyboard because it's so hot. and all kinds of things break loose. And that is only 10, right? And imagine if you do some heavy lifting like on the MX or the virtual MX or the Cisco CSR, man, those are stuff. But all I wanted was just SSH the device, do a shover, repeat that 200 times. And, I don't need 200 devices to do that. And imagine the latency for like a real device or, even a lab device, just because it slows it down. So totally. So how long did that project exist before Enric decided to find out and like join the project? How did you guys collaborate on that front?
The project probably exists about 2 years already.
Okay.
But I kind of started it, created it. It solved the problem that I had at hand at the time and left it aside while I was working on other stuff. And yeah, I think Enric picked it up a few months ago, and he already made a significant progress on it that I'm sure he will talk about.
Yeah, basically at that time I was kind of having the same problems as Dennis was having. Basically, that if I need to virtualize a switch, it takes a lot of resources. Like just one, I think a container lab, it can be easily 1 GB. So you have a computer with 8 GB, well, you can have only 8 switches in the best case scenario. At that time, I was having the problem that I don't know if you are familiar with PON networks, basically passive optical networking, widely used in ISPs. So I had the problem that there's in Container Lab or in GNS3, DB, there is no available network operating system. So basically, yeah, if I use, in my case, I'm doing it mainly for Huawei smart apps. So basically the problem is like, I cannot emulate it. There's no way I can do it. So I need to do it from scratch. And I think it's at a certain point, as Dennis was showing it in Network to Code Slack, his new project, Beagle, which basically is just a command line interface. I was like, oh, that sounds to me like basically a network operating system. And actually, there's small differences, which can be it's interesting to go over the nuances, but we can go later if you want. So basically, the problem I had is I need to emulate the connection over SSH. I don't care how it works in the insides. Actually, most of the time you don't care if the board works or not. Yeah, you want to check it out, but you don't want to see how it works in the inside or how the change of the packets work. So you just care about the CLI.
Right.
So basically, that means that I need a way to emulate that. So FakeNOS was a perfect match in that sense for myself. Like I needed to bring on board a new network operating system. So FakeNOS basically has a syntax with the YAML, which to me was like mind blowing. Wow, it's easy. Basically, that's the whole point. Like they wanted to make it easy. And I think, to me, like the most brilliant thing about what Dennis did at that time was like, oh boy, that you have the YAML file. It sounds easy, but come up with that. And then basically I start, I have, for example, there's a project called LTC templates. I really recommend it to go over it. It's just really simple. It's just a parser. But this parser has the tests, and the tests actually are the outputs. So basically, I just thought at that time, well, you have a lot of platforms which are kind of easy to implement it. So basically with the YAML file, you can actually do just copy the outputs and you just can have a lot of platforms. Basically, that's why I did the platform thing. So going back to where I was, I picked it up. Basically, it solved my problem of having the new operating system that Container Lab didn't have at that time.
That's interesting. So you hit a edge case on a particular NOS that's not very mainstream, basically, right? Like it doesn't exist. So you either go take the real device or nothing. Or before FakeNOS is nothing.
Yeah. The problem is like one of those devices, it's really expensive. We are not talking about 100 euros. We are talking about thousands.
Right.
So it's kind of a huge problem. And as well, if you are, I will be a little too technical, passive optical networking, if you want to check out the CLI, for example, I want to see how many ONTs do I have, basically like how N terminals do I have. Usually you will talk about thousands. So for me, setting up a real lab device, which I can break it, I can do whatever I want. I just have one OLT and I have 1,000 ONTs. It's not viable. So basically in that sense, I needed to emulate all of that. And well, actually FakeNOS for me, it's kind of, I have the CLI. That it's easy to check it out. But as well, for example, I was planning for SNMP and NetConf and other protocols, which you just check it out. That's basically the idea behind it.
Nice. So walk us through like the Hello World experience, right? So Dennis, maybe you could start. When people want to just try it out, like the Hello World, what do they need? I found it remarkably easy, but I think you tell a better story on that.
Yeah, you just need to pip install it and run a command FakeNOS, and that will start several emulated devices that you can SSH straight away into or
Right.
point your scripts. That's pretty much it, how you can start with it.
Yeah, so out of the box, so you say, okay, I'll pip install FakeNOS and I'll FakeNOS like initiate, start, whatever, right? And then you'll start a few devices where you could SSH to the IP address and then it differentiate by port, right? Like this port is this device, this port is this device. Is that true?
Yeah, on your local host, pretty much, yeah, this is the case, yes.
And then it's just like any other, like just say Cisco iOS, right? That you could do a show version, all the supported commands, show clock, and so on and so forth, right?
Not all commands, of course, because it's an emulation. Even when you SSH into the device, it's not like the human being, it's not the primary target of it.
Right.
So you wouldn't have some of the things implemented in place as you would expect when you SSH into the router, because again, it's not to do the networking labbing,
right?
It's just to test your automation. Automation usually sends predefined commands,
right?
And these are the commands that you can input on the command line if you want to test them, and you get the predefined output back, which can vary slightly, but in general case, yeah, the output is predefined.
Yeah, so the question mark won't work, right?
It will show all the available commands.
Okay.
But for example, there is a command show running config,
Mhm.
right? You can have several variations of this command, like show run,
right?
show running conf, or etc., etc. You have to predefine each and every input differently in the system, but you can point them to the same output if you want to, depending on what commands your script or application will actually be sending to the device. So it's not like fully blown interactive command line shell as on the real device, but it's good enough for scripts testing, for automations testing.
Yeah, for sure. So Enric, this kind of ties back into what you were talking about, right? You have a predefined input, like show RUN or whatever variation that have it, and then you have a bunch of output that you could define. And these are all done within a YAML file, you said.
Yes, and as well you have Python models in case that you want dynamic behavior. For example, usually when you are doing just checking out, basically that the script I wrote, it works. Sometimes, for example, in my case, I just want to register an ID. So I need first to have it there, and then I have it. So basically first, most of the outputs are YAML because are easy to implement. And then you can start implementing more sophisticated behaviors. Like basically Denis at the original versions, I see that there were like functions and there were already, for example, in Cisco iOS, you have the show sys output, or I think it's show clock. Basically, it's changing over the time. You will see that actually it's the time from your computer right now. It takes it from there.
Okay, so it's actually real time. So
yeah.
It's not like a 1975 or something.
No. Like you can have this kind of modularity, which actually make it even better. To me, for example, one of the main problems we may find with most of the current, let's say, emulators or simulators, it's that they are using the real network operating system, so that's quite heavy. So that doesn't match it for me. Like I want to embed it into a CI/CD pipeline, for example, GitHub Actions. So what's the problem? I cannot do it currently. So just go to GitHub Actions and try to set up the container line. It's gonna be hard. So FakeNOS actually fits in there because just like I have like it's kind of works like a wrapper. So you wrap your code around it, and then you have like the simulated environment. Actually, I think in the examples part, you will have two examples. One that is the basically for testing it yourself to know what it's doing, and then you have one that is CI/CD pipelines, basically for testing. So with around a width or even a decorator from Python, you can have that. So basically, it tries to mimic some behavior that you usually see a lot in other open source projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are two great use cases, like your DevOps, your testing, your code. So I know, and I want to add a third use case, which is for learning, right? When you're just starting out in learning just your first Hello World for Python and you want to have your NetMiko or when you're talking to like a device or whatnot, it's hard to spin up a whole lab. I mean, I've experienced that myself where I spent a whole chapter in my book to actually talk about CML and like how to set it up and how do you bridge it to your real network. And so that your management interface needs to be talking to each other. And it's like, it's very much a bad experience for the reader. And I also throw in, it's like, I don't know if you guys heard of Python Bytes, but BYTES, but essentially they provide small, like 100 days of Python, that type of stuff, where they encapsulate the lesson within one day. So I tried to partner with them to do a lot of networking labs. And what ended up being was they don't have like which developer has a CML lab in their home, right? So like they don't have the back end to do this. And so we ended up using a bunch of mock for mocking API calls, and that creates all kinds of problem like show clock, right? Like it won't return the actual thing. And if you get something wrong in the body, it doesn't return the actual error code you would see from talking to the device and so on and so forth. So I think this is also great for people who are just starting out and trying to learn.
There's a funny part. I use it for education, a little bit, let's say, and I didn't realize it. Basically, for example, I have a colleague of mine who basically he was quite new on that of network automation. He was just beginning, and it's like, yo, there's this FakeNOS thing. I see it. It's great. I'm just modifying it for myself. You can use it for trying your own scripts. And actually, you start using it, and well, it works, and you start understanding how it works. The thing, because it's not intuitive at the beginning if you are not really familiar with that.
A quick sponsor break to hear about Torero. Torero is a free tool from the network automation and orchestration folks at iTential. What does Torero do? Torero builds an execution environment around your Python scripts, Ansible playbooks, or OpenTofu plans so that you can run them as a service. This means that you don't have to worry whether or not your peer will be able to run your automation. You're getting rid of the "it works on my laptop but nowhere else" problem. Because once that automation exists as a Torero service, all the dependencies have been handled. So I worked through the Torero Hello World demo, and it was straightforward. I installed Torero on an Ubuntu box. Linux and Mac are both supported, including Apple Silicon, and connected Torero to a public GitHub repo that I created for the test. In that repo was a simple Python script and a requirements.txt. I told Torero to create a service around that Python script, and Torero read the requirements file and built the service. Now, the script is executable via Torero Run. Torero can be run on a single machine your team shares in local mode or in a server mode that dispatches automation jobs to Torero clients. Build your automation, turn it into a Torero service, and share it with your team. Download free Torero at torero.dev. That's TORERO.dev.
No, I was going to say the problem is when you're trying out something, when you're trying to learn something, you got to hold everything else constant, right? The scientific method, everything else needs to be constant. You can't have this variable of the lab where maybe it's taking up too much resources, it might crash, like all these every other things, right? You want to make that constant as well. So the thing you're testing, the device under testing, the DUT is your script, is your code. I thought that was just fantastic use case.
Yeah, actually, there's even one test case I did it inside the FakeNOS, but basically just checking out that on the devices they can connect with NetMeeple. So when you see platforms that are supported, basically it means that you can access with NetMeeple and send commands and they work correctly. But currently, so basically there's the test of that as well. So that's a funny part of that.
It's awesome for education, for DevOps, and just, have a lightweight thing. It doesn't replace, like what Dennis was saying, it doesn't replace the real thing. The next step is really just go talk to either your virtualized or your hardware lab. But before then, the hundreds of like unit tests and those could be used with FakeNOS until you need to either test a data plane, right? Like you're not going to be able to test a data plane even for a virtualized device, but there's a bunch of use cases for it. What are some of the enhancement? I think you mentioned some of it, Enric, on the enhancement that's done in the last 6 months after you got to the project. So do you want to mention some other features that you added or the enhancements?
For example, one is the platforms thing that I mentioned it before. Then there's another one, basically a configuration file. So one of the problems that I found it, or at least checking out all the documentation, I didn't find it. It's basically, I want to embed initial configuration state. So imagine that you know that your current state, the current state of your network, it's already in output mode or netbox or whatever. So you say, I know that this router has this VLAN in this interface or whatever. So I just want to wrap all of that inside the, let's say, YAML file again. So basically, you embed it into the FakeNOS. FakeNOS basically has an initial state where your network already knows that how it's going. That's one of the things. And in order as well to be reactive, we were talking before, one of the problems that you had originally, it's basically that the models, they were completely models without any class inside. So going back a little bit into programming, I don't know if you are familiar with OOP, object-oriented programming, which basically you are just creating an object which has attributes and has methods. So basically taking out this idea to the core, basically the configuration file that we were talking before, it's just an attribute of that object, and that object basically is a device. And this device has a methods, which basically when you are calling the CLI, basically the show version or show clock, actually it's calling a method over that class. And basically it's going around that and making it better. Because, for example, before, if you are creating 3 devices with the same models, basically the 3 of them, they were having exactly all the same. Because the way I import Python, it's just going to be always the same file. So it's not going to be 3 different files. So basically, wrapping into a class, all of that means that you can have 3 different objects, which actually are kind of completely different models, completely different devices. So yeah, that's basically some of the contributions. As well, testing cases, way more testing cases. I want to make sure that it's stable, it's reliable. I wanted something that, okay, now I know it works. Because like one of the problems that you encounter a lot in software engineering is you do something, but you didn't test it and then it breaks. Oh, why did it break? So I can't track it, where like try to hold it up all the software to make it good. And yeah, that's as far as I can remember right now. As well, I'm working on other things as well. But yeah, basically, that's one of the main improvements.
Got it. How many contributors are there for the project? And I know you're the maintainer. So Dennis, are you mainly just kind of watching on the sideline, or are you still driving some of the strategic vision? How much involved are you with the project? Are you right now currently with the project?
Yes, I am. I don't have much resources I can dedicate to this project at the time.
Right.
But Enric handling most of the stuff by himself at the moment. So whenever I feel like I need FakeNOS again or need additional features on it, I'm sure we'll come to him and we will discuss what we can do to achieve those. For now, the project, it's solving the problems for me,
right,
for myself. And yeah, I probably will spend some time on looking on the bugs and things like that we might come across. But yeah, I think Enric is the primary driver behind the project at the moment, and I'm just here to help pretty much.
Got it. But Enric, you're just one person, right? How much help have you received?
I mean, I'm just one person. First, I do it as well. I'm driving it myself because I need it for my thesis, first of all. But as well, it solves me. It's solving me the problem of I cannot emulate my network operating system. So this is why I want to do it. But as well, I mean, if someone has a problem, and as Denis said, like whenever I have a problem, I will contribute and I will try to like making it better. That's the whole point of open source. Like I have this problem, I will try to solve it. Okay, we got it. So then we move to the next and next and next. So basically, currently I'm just solving that problem for my network operating system as well. If there is any problem that anyone else has, let's say, if they just write to me like, hey, Enric, I have this problem that it doesn't work. I can help with that. I can check it out. If it's something easy, there's no problem. I can do it myself. I can help on that. But the thing is, like, it can be a huge project. It can grow as much as you want. So that's great in that sense. The same as, I don't know, any other project. Like, you are trying to solve your own problems with that. I do it open source because I really believe it can help other people as well, as Denis did. And that's the way actually it's moved currently in that sense. And I mean, I'm contributing as much as I can. As well, it helps a lot for our own testing platforms that we are using. So FakeNOS actually, it's really lightweight. I think I checked it out a few days ago. I think it's about like 50 megabytes, one device. So it's quite light in the sense. It makes available that I can have thousands of devices and I can virtualize as much as I want and check out whatever I want on those devices.
Yeah, I think that's kind of I don't want to say problem, but kind of the norm for open source projects, right? Like you'd be so surprised to see, I forgot what the stat was, but essentially, I'm going to get it wrong, but essentially they're saying the top 50 GitHub projects, open source GitHub project that have the most stars, I think over 80-90% of them are handled by and maintained by a handful of folks, right? Like 5 or less. And these could be projects like the request project, right? Python request using every single AWS call that you do, and then they use on the back end, they use in NASA, like, and then it's still handled by a handful of people, and these are folks that are doing it out of contribution and their goodwill, like you have. So I think we need to figure out a way to support these open source projects so that I don't think you're trying to strike gold with it, but at least it's like worth your time, right? Like, you're pretty much going out to the full-time employment pretty soon, and is your employer going to be supportive of that, right?
Technically, it's solving some problems for us. So yeah, partly yes. But the thing is, that when you said the problem with most of the open source communities, it's as well, you need to make money at the end of the day. That's how enterprises work. At the end of the day, if you don't make money, you will die. So that's a problem. So open source, it's helping you. So as it's helping you, so I think a few years ago, I read some posts that basically help open source communities. They save trillions of euros around the world. Yeah, I truly believe that as well. Like AWS, for example, they use a lot of open source projects. Google, any project currently, they use open source. So I think it's as well good to contribute back. If you can with money, that's okay. That's fine. That's currently not my case. I'm not driving it by money, but contributions and trying to help on that. And I have this problem. I will try to save it. I will try to fix it and so on. That's a way to drive open source between all people. That's one, let's say, community-driven open source. Then you have like enterprise-driven open source, which basically I have this product. It's open source, and then I have services around that. I sell the services or the hosting or, I don't know, education around that. So that's another model. So currently the model of FakeNOS, it's community-driven in that sense. Hopefully one day there's, one company, they say like, I want to buy this, and that's great. Or they want to continue it. But to me, at least, it's going to be okay. I mean, that's a way to help people in that sense. So yeah, if you are using this project and you think that you can help, please do it. That's a driver of currently open source projects.
Yeah. So the different business model that you mentioned, right? So, you sell service around it like Red Hat, right? Like they have the open source version, they sell support around it. You have the freemium or, maybe like the free in the beginning type of thing, like Elastic or, for the Elasticsearch backend or for Kafka with Confluent, where, like they both offer, this enterprise sponsor open source projects. And then you have that third model where I think it's the Python Software Foundation, where they become this governing 503. And I don't know if you're familiar with like the US nonprofit system, but essentially you have to register. And if each of these projects need to register as their own 503 with their own governance, with their own like board of directors, that becomes really hassle and, just ginormous amount of work just to keep it running. But Python Software Foundation, create this governing body, and then they take these projects, for example, Flask or whatnot, into their umbrella and then just distributed the corporate sponsorship beneath it. And it's easy for Microsoft to write like a big check or whatnot to PSF, and then PSF distribute it to the smaller project, as opposed to nickel and dime. Some of these corporations for like, 10,000 here, 5,000 there, they kind of do that model. But then there's this model that you're talking about, which is purely community driven. So it's the sweat and blood of the developers.
That's eventually community-driven. That's great, but at a certain point, they need to move to a more sustainable way at the end. That's the way it ought to work. It could be naive for me to say like, no, I can't do it all the time. No, I wish I could, But at a certain point, it needs to start moving towards like something that's sustainable, that people are getting foundations for that. That's actually the funding for that. I mean, we can do it in, I don't know, perhaps it's going to be like some European Union, or perhaps it's going to be from US, or perhaps it's going to be from Australia, or whatever. I don't know right now. But at a certain point, we will have to start, in network automation. I didn't see this, what you say with the Python Foundation.
Right. Like the PSF. Yeah.
Yeah, the PSF. I didn't see that in, let's say, projects with network automation. Like you have projects like Ethical, you have projects like Normir, you have projects like FakeNOS. They are purely community driven, and there's no entity which holds all of that. And at a certain point, I think as we start growing more and more and more and more, we will need that. And of course, you have companies like Nautobot, Network to Code, or you have like companies like SusQ, or you have other companies. They are making profit from basically selling their own platforms or education, which is great. It's awesome. But as well, those projects that most of the people they can use, but they don't have, let's say, the aim at the end of the day for selling all of that things, they will need to have some sort of umbrella, like the Python Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think Denis will be on that with me. I don't know how it works in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, just like what Denis said, right? Like he created this project to solve his own problem, and his problem was solved. And then he doesn't have the time or resources to dedicate more on it. So you took over. And so maybe, kind of passing the baton but, we need to figure out a way where the network automation community needs to get together and kind of figure out a way to make it sustainable, right? Whether it's like the enterprise model or is jointly forming a nonprofit for the governing body to take away all the busy work so that developer could focus on what they do best. Yeah, I think we kind of beat that horse at this point. So what are some of the future features or directions for the project besides, I mean, you mentioned a little bit on, kind of instantiate more objects, right? So that they're differentiated by themselves. What are some of the future features that you're looking to develop for the project for FakeNOS?
I mean, first of all, SNMP.
Is this still around? No, I'm just kidding. It absolutely is.
Actually, they use it a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
I can tell you that, for example, all the companies I have seen, at least here in Spain, as far as I know, they use SNMP. So even, for example, last day I was checking out the ISP because I had a little problem with the router and so on. So I check it out and take the captures that they were using SNMP. So
right.
Implementing SNMP, then, like, for example, to have it, like I said before, like I have a YAML file that I can check. I say, like, if I send that, I reply that. It's as simple as, like, I reply that. If I
like this OID, that will return like the CPU level or whatever.
Yeah, like as a whole idea. Then moving forward to first as well, having the configuration file, check it out entirely correctly, like have like with pedantic models, like then it's started with that. Do we need for how it checks out like basically the inventory file, how you check it out. They use pedantic models, so making it the same for configurations and moving forward on that sense. And implementing more platforms. Please, we need more to implement even more. So that's the whole point.
I think that would be so helpful. I mean, because SMP is expensive, right? It's very expensive on the control plane and the CPU. I mean, I've been to an environment where there's so many pollers and they're polling so frequently. It actually, increased the CPU load by 5% just for all the SMP pollers, right? Not to mention, like, this is a more of a layer 8 and layer 9 problem. One person could be polling it, and then that information could be distributed back in. But hey, no, like, we don't want that. We want to just have our own poller, and everybody just polls the device to death, and who cares if it's 5%? But I think that would be super helpful on the SNMP support. That would have like decreased the development time as well as alleviate some of these extra overheads on the device themselves.
Yeah, and as well, for example, there's another protocol which I have been asked about it, NetCom. So that makes sense as well to me. Like once we have those two, then we have the CLI, can be Telnet, SSH. You just can implement a small server. Basically, having NetCom and or GNMI and so on. Basically, first SNMP, then NetCom, then GNMI. That could be like the path towards moving in the protocol sense.
I was going to suggest that anybody, maybe Kentic, we're looking at you,
Yeah.
like whoever, or Google, if you're a big users of this and then you think this could help you, hey, please feel to reach out to Enric, to Denis, to me. We'll figure something out, right? To kind of put together a more sustainable model.
Yeah, like that's as well one of the main problems. Let's say you wanted to make it sustainable. Again, going back to the same point, that's one of the core problems that right now has FakeNOS, that we wanted to make it sustainable. So we as well need to do this kind of part of marketing, a more non-technical part.
Yeah, the more awareness.
Yeah, people make it awareness. Please use it. Please check it out. You like it? What's not working? We will go to the technical part, and then as well. Okay, you want to pay back some? I don't know. It's just €1 a month. Okay, we can make it sustainable with the effort of millions of people, whatever. So that's the point of make it better and better with over time and with a sustainable model at a certain point.
Got it. Yeah, I actually didn't see like a kind of a donation page or on the GitHub. Did I just miss it, or is that not turned on for FakeNOS?
Not right now. So we'll have to talk about it as well on how to make it and so on. Like that's some thoughts on the fly. But yeah, that's one of the main problems on the long run of FakeNOS.
Yeah, you mentioned how people could contribute, right? Like people could give it a shot. People could adding to the supported platforms, basically adding YAML files on this is the command, this is the output that you want to do. Is there any other call to action for this project?
Yeah, that could be feature suggestions.
Okay, feature suggestions.
Raise a bug, raise an issue if you see any problems with it. That could be very helpful as well, because one of the goal of open source is to be able to scale. Yep. Like how many bugs one person can discover in the code, right?
That's interesting. Have you hit a ceiling? What's the biggest environment that you've launched with FakeNOS, just to impress me here?
Probably about 200 devices or so. So it's not very big. So it's not very impressive as well. It's purely because I don't have massive computer on hands. And whenever you're doing SSH encryption and things like that, the CPU goes up regardless. So you still need quite a good horsepower to be able to span up thousands of devices. Less than simulating them, but still significant. Another thing that I wanted to touch about is that on the features, I probably will need to add some time in the near future, the capability to do like chaos monkey type of stuff, like maybe drop connections, increase the round trip time, or produce some bogus output, just basically to test the reliability of my scripts. So that could be another feature that we might have in the FakeNOS soon.
I think that's great. That's great. That's like Netflix last microservices. So yeah, making it for network automation.
Yeah, the chaos monkey. I love that. I actually saw a bunch of ideas around that on just randomly inject like latencies or like you said, Denis, the output will get like truncated or
drop connection in the middle of the output, things like that. Like basically emulate the real life networks problems.
That's the whole point of FakeNOS. With containers, for example, with container lab and so on, it's hard to emulate all of that a little bit. So with programmatically, you can do that as much as you want, but as much as you can code.
I could just hear Roman going, wait, what? Like I spent all these time trying to make it work and you want to like make it not work at random.
Yeah.
Oh, that's easy. I just turned off my laptop. Okay, cool. No, I mean, I think this is a great project. I wish I'd know about it a lot sooner, but hey, the listeners, you're in luck. We know about it now. And I know for me, I'm actively using it in some of our projects. So I really do wish this project continues on and we continue to support projects like this in our community. I think it's much needed. So before we say goodbye, is there anything else that I missed in our conversation? I think we covered kind of a broad range of scope, but is there anything that I missed that you want to mention? Maybe we start with you, Denis.
I think we covered everything.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, guys.
What about you, Enric?
Just to say thank you to you. No, for real. You don't realize how much you are helping it with bringing it to the world, in making a call to action for everyone. So thank you very much in that sense. You don't realize how helpful.
The Mutual Admiration Club. We'll just like quickly move on. No, I mean, that's the least I could do. I mean, I think you guys did all the hard work and I am super impressed when I saw this project introduced to me by, I forgot to mention it, it's Anthony House, my colleague at NTC, who found this project, really impressed by it. He's on paternity right now, but I believe he's going to come back, and we have a rain check to actually do another show like this to introduce more tools such as FakeNOS that can help with your day-to-day operations. So before we say goodbye, however, so Enric, where can people find you? Where can people follow you on social, or is your GitHub handle? Like, how do you market?
You can just ping me on LinkedIn, Enric Pitarch, or on my GitHub, EvilMonkey19, whatever you feel free.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have both of those in the show notes. What about you, Dennis? Where can people find you online, or are you even online? Do you accepting LinkedIn connections? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the same thing, GitHub and LinkedIn. One of the best ways to get in touch. Also, there is an email in every project that I have, like my personal email that people usually reach out to, and also network to code Slack channels. So I can be found there as well.
Nice. Yeah. So we'll definitely have your GitHub, your blog, Dennis, as well as your GitHub, as well as your LinkedIn for Enric. I really appreciate you guys coming in. I had a great time chatting, and I hope to see great and awesome things future for the project. I'll hold you up for the SNMP bit, because I think it's just going to be super helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Network Automation Nerds. Do you have any feedbacks for Network Automation, this episode, for our guests? Send me some follow-ups at packetpushers.net/FU. I want to hear from you. Check out our website at packetpushers.net to find other network engineering focused podcasts, blogs, YouTube videos, and our Slack channels. Last but not least, remember that too much network automation will never be enough.